Hello everyone. I'm Gemma Starr, and welcome to another episode of Heart Warriors. Heart Warriors is a series I've been inspired and guided to do thanks to my energetic connection with the beautiful Katajuda, which is the sacred masculine rock formation in Central Australia, very close to Uluru, our beautiful sacred feminine site. What I'm here to do is to give a platform to our men so they can share their journey and experience into the heart. What challenges did they have as children? What was their deepest, darkest moment as an adult? And how did they start spiraling up? What tools, practices, wisdom, insights can they now share with other men walking this path? And of course, us women who are walking right there beside them. Today's guest is a man called Bernhard Guenther, and Bernhard is a integrative bodywork massage therapist. He's a holistic coach, and he runs a great podcast with his wife called the Cosmic Matrix Podcast. So looking forward to unwrapping Bernhard's journey, and thank you for walking with us. Enjoy. Hello, Bernhard. Welcome to Heart Warriors.
Thank you. So thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this. Awesome.
Oh, me too. It's going to be a great show. Bernhard, let's start off with getting to know a little bit about you. How would you describe the man you are today?
Oof. Who am I? That's the ultimate question, right? That's kind of what started my journey, actually. The ultimate question to get to know myself. Who am I? I don't know, many different incarnations, constantly a work in progress, right? In the sense, the paradox of work in progress and just connecting to who you really are already. I don't know, like in my life, I guess, not to go too much into the past, but I grew up in Germany. I was born actually in the US, in Los Angeles, to German parents, and then they moved to Munich, Germany when I was 2 years old. So I grew up there. And early on in my life, also like in high school, like kind of almost a typically kind of outsider type, didn't fit in, couldn't fit in. And even as I grew older, I couldn't relate to any of the goals, aims, or anything regular, quote unquote, people had, just like, okay, I'll get out of school, making as much money as possible, finding a family, stuff. I didn't get it. I always said there must be more to life. And I always remember, even as a young child, being out in the fields in Germany, looking at the stars, there must be more to it, right? So I didn't like school. I mean, I did well, but it was just mechanically going along with the program. And then I found, not until shortly after high school, I found my passion, which was drums and music, because music connected me to something higher, transcendental, right? That's when I had my own first, I guess, spiritual experience, literally playing the drum set. And that was my ticket to the US, going back to the US and studying drums and percussion, and going to music school and playing in bands in LA, the music scene. It was pretty heavy, dark music. It was more into like kind of heavy metal, industrial, grunge type stuff back in the 90s, right? And within that, there was actually a great process, like kind of almost shamanic drumming, like exploring all of this stuff, pent up energies, frustrations, not fitting in. What's this world? Kind of like my teenage angst helped me to process through music, using very dark and heavy music for shadow work. That's, I think, has its place. Within that, more stuff came up, and then I started more question, but even this music thing didn't fulfill me. I wanted to be like a, touring musician and do the rock star thing and all of that. But then, I think looking back, there's this almost esoteric saying, knock and knock and ask, and, you shall be given or doors will be open. So I always ask the questions, there must be more to life, and who am I? That's what I really wanted to figure out, who I really am, right? Because again, I could not relate to anybody else. I wasn't driven by money or power or anything like that. So that kind of started my journey early on into like the, spiritual realm, psychology, came across shadow work and all of that. And mostly because I was suffering. I mean, that's also one of the questions people ask me, how did you come about doing your work? Why do you do what you do? What you just asked me. And then I always summarize it in one sentence: because I was suffering. Deeply suffering, definitely depression, despair, suicidal tendencies. I mean, in Hollywood, I did the rock and roll thing with all the drugs included. Up to, even many people don't know, at some point I was shooting up heroin for a month down in Hollywood. It was more like following the rock and like more the rock archetype, kind of like wanting to explore that, right? I just wanted I was drawn to that is taboo in a sense, what is forbidden, you know what I mean? Because I was questioning everything. But essentially I realized, no, I need to go way deeper and figure myself out, because I wasn't happy. I was depressed, right? And drugs didn't do anything for me. I never had an addictive personality, thanks God, I guess, because I never got hooked on anything. I was just, okay, this is interesting, but this doesn't work for me. But I went deeper, and then I came across, I remember shadow work in the 90s, young in psychology already, and heard of Alan Watts, Krishnamurti. That really opened up a whole new world. And then I got also into the conspiracy world, questioning what's going on in the world, right? Came across first David Icke in the 90s. He kind of helped me to open up the doors, so to speak. And then I went deeper more into esoteric, occult, fringe knowledge, the alien phenomena, did my own research, and was just really fascinated. And then one thing leads after the other, like you kind of like stumble down the rabbit hole, so to speak. But then I realized, okay, then everything made more sense. The world is not what we have been taught and told we are, And even I realized too, I mean, within myself, and that's what I see also nowadays, a lot of people, especially men as well, if we were talking about men, that I had a lot of desires, wants, and needs that were not my own, right? And I saw people suffering and not being happy because they followed desires, wants, aims, goals that were not their own, right? They were socially, culturally conditioned, or parental conditioning program, what the parents expected, or trying to fill a hole within themselves, or trying to out of insecurity, getting the car, the job, the trophy wife, whatever, you know what I mean? It's just social, cultural conditioning. And I wasn't driven by that, but I could see that, as Krishnamurti would say, it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And that's what people were trying to do in that sense, right? So that became very, very early clear to me. And then, within that, as I was working on myself, working through my own layers of my trauma, childhood wounding, shadow, and all this stuff, and getting into spiritual work, then something deeper emerged, more my true essence. And I found actually my a deeper purpose, or a talent and gift I didn't know even I had, which was healing work, body work, massage therapy, and all of that. It came very natural to me. And I then met my mentor who introduced me early on to yoga, body work, and all of that. Psychedelics helped in the beginning as well. I used to work a lot of psilocybin mushrooms in the 90s by myself, just to kind of psychonaut, exploring, and help me also to do the inner work in a sense. I used to always I realized these are not party drugs, so I kind of used it for inner work right away. But then, I found this gift. I had a really natural touch, and in terms of doing the body work, the massage work, and my mentor helped me and taught me. And then when my band broke up, I pursued body work. I went to massage school in LA and went through that program. And then I really got a hang of it and sought out other teachers. Whatever I realized, whatever I'm passionate about, and really have my heart and soul into it, then I work for it. Really, I put a lot of effort and work. Even with drums, I used to practice 8 hours a day and got teachers, and I want to perfect it. I want to be good at it. I realized also early in life, I wasn't rejecting the world of just being lazy or be like, fuck it, I don't want to pay rent. You know what I mean? This whole thing sucks. No, I just wanted to find my own thing, deeper purpose, right? And I know work and effort is required, but whatever I pursue, I need to be the goal, the aim cannot be just material reward. That it doesn't satisfy me. There has to be something else. And that's what, drumming, music gave me, and then also body work, massage. And then I did that for nearly 20 years, had my own integrative body work private practice, combining all these different modalities, and I was really good at it. And that kind of morphed then more also into coaching and therapeutic work in a sense, because I realized the body-mind connection, right? We store a lot of trauma, wounds, and all of that in our body. So I'm all about holistic work in that sense, and not just mental, intellectual work. And that kind of morphed then with my work as I was, started to write about all these topics out there, conspiracies over the past 20 years on my website, veilofreality.com. Also more like coaching services and all of that, holistic coaching. And, and then also, getting deeper into the topics I write about, be it about not just conspiracies, but esoteric work, occult knowledge, right? Fringe and all that stuff. And back in the days, nobody would listen really, you know what I mean? But over the past 3 years, finally people have woken up to all of that. And I don't know, like when I look back over the past 20 years, I mean, the saying applies, tell God your plans and he will laugh at you, because there was always a divine grace, right? There was a divine guidance, and I didn't expect to do what I'm doing now. And that's how I approach life now. Like who knows what I will be doing in 5 years from now? There's certain intention and aim, right? But ultimately, the intention aim is to find the truth of my being. And there's a sincere kind of drive for me within, like a call of the soul to awaken, right? And I even say with people I work with, or people out there, I see there's always a choice people make. I always like to use Adyashanti's quote, when he asked, do you really want to awaken or just be happy in your dream life, right? And there's no right or wrong choice. It's just where you're at, right? But for me, just there's a difference between self-actualization, kind of like Tony Robbins style, like, I want to be awaken the giant within, which I tried many years ago, or self-realization, where you go a bit deeper and go beyond desires, beyond trying to manifest your dream life and whatnot, because all of that external stuff, doesn't truly fulfill you. That is not to denounce the material world, right? But it's the attachment towards it. So I think that's, so I'm going off on a tangent here, but it kind of in a nutshell describes your big question, how did I become the man I am now? So, and it's still ongoing, I would say.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. What would you say was your greatest challenge as a child?
Just loneliness, being alone in the sense, not being able to fit in. I was bullied in school, made fun of, not physically, but more psychologically bullying, very insecure, shy. So that's a challenge. I didn't have a girlfriend until after high school, my first girlfriend at the age of 19. Right. So even, lost my virginity like at age 19 or 20, so very, so that was kind of like, especially back then, that was definitely challenging because you compare yourself to other boys and whatnot. Yeah. So that I think was my biggest challenge, more dealing with rejection a lot. Yeah.
So being so aware as you are now, can you articulate how you spiraled up from that wound so that anyone else who does have that wound, can relate to it? How did you heal that in yourself?
Well, first of all, recognizing it and admitting it, right? I mean, there's many responses people get into to avoid feeling, right? And one of it can be addictions, drugs, the most natural one, which I tried. It didn't work for me, right? Because I just didn't do it. It got worse for me. The other thing is, for example, like I remember the time, that was also late 90s or something. I remember this day clearly, like I was working, I had a day job, working at an animal hospital. I loved animals, so it was fun, but also back then was $7 an hour, not much, and all $7 an hour. My band broke up. I had nothing, and I was, working just to pay bills. And then one day I woke up really depressed. I didn't know what to do with my life. I woke up in fetal position, crying literally, and this pain and this suffering. And then this voice appeared, then really like, you need to figure out who you are, right? Who am I? So it's really that drive to really confront the problem, not to shy away from it, but ask questions, right? That's the thing, right? There needs to be, that's why I also teach and the work I do with people I work with, or my wife and I, we do together. It's that commitment, right? To answer the call, as I call it, right? So there needs to be, I mean, there's a saying, even Goethe's quote, I think Goethe said it or somebody else, once you have to fully commit, doors open where there haven't been doors before. So that's kind of the one ingredient to really want to know, want to heal, right? To really want to figure it out, no matter what it comes. And it usually doesn't go by your own terms, right? The other trap is trying to then want somebody else to heal you. That's not how it works. The biggest lesson I've learned also as a professional body worker, massage therapist for 20 years is that the healer, that I am not doing the healing. Any healer out there who's promising, oh, I'm going to heal this, heal that, it's already a red flag. You're not a healer to me, because for me, a true conscious healer, body work, or whatever service or modality you work, you understand that you are just a conduit. You help others heal yourself. I'm my own healer, right? Others, we need assistants. We need mentors, teachers, therapists, coaches, body workers. I work with all of them, but the best ones I've worked with know that they kind of do the work for me. I need to do the work. I am the one, right? They can guide and help because we have our own blind spots. So number one, admitting what's really going on, facing it, and then really doing the commitment to work on it, whatever may come. Doing the investment also. I'm not necessarily talking monetary wise, that's part of it too, yes, but also, as Gurdjieff would say, paying with yourself, with effort and work. It doesn't happen by itself, right? Nowadays, we live in a very different time nowadays with this all. I noticed there's a certain, I don't know, maybe a different generation, certain entitlement to have everything for free, right? Nobody wants to do any work on themselves anymore. Everybody wants to have a quick fix, so to speak, similar like to the short attention span. Tell me everything you know in a tweet, and I have no attention for anything else. No, it requires work and effort, right? So number one, doing that commitment, and number two, also not shying away, but asking for help, reaching out, right? I wouldn't be where I'm here. I wouldn't be here if it wouldn't be for my mentors, for my teachers, for everybody else I work with, help me on the way. Some of them are not official teachers or mentors. They just appear in a life and guide you and show you another book or teaching. You know what I mean? And some of them can be more official ones. Sometimes you seek them out. I mean, in my life until I was 40, I didn't save one penny. I reinvested everything back into myself, in like learning about bodywork, workshops, coaches, self, development, all of that, just to learn, study and figure myself out, reinvesting into myself in all ways. So there's no other way. So, and it is not easy work, right? It's always easier just to lay it aside, just to go on social media, smoke a joint, or just avoid all of that, right? To distract, or trying to, focus on these external things. That's why I said before with desires, sometimes I would recommend people asking, where do your desires truly come from? Because what I've seen again, many people, their trauma response is trying to fill a hole within yourself. So that's like symptom management. It doesn't work. And again, it's not to denounce desire or the material world, but it's like really understanding yourself. Because that's, I feel, what the world is sorely missing. I see so many people again, acting mechanically under the illusion of free will. That's another aspect. What again, some teachers I quote Gurdjieff coming face to face with the horror of the situation, or the terror of the situation, as he calls it. And what that means is like not only seeing the craziness, the evil, the madness in the world, but the horror of the situation, looking within how mechanical we are. There's no free will. How responses are very reactive, unconscious because of trauma, childhood wounding. You see it in relationships, how we are attracted to certain things or reject certain things. It's all mechanical. There's no conscious choice in that. So that all needs to be faced. It's just, before we can truly do the deeper work, we need to acknowledge where we're at. Or as it said, before we can wake up, we do need to acknowledge that we are asleep.
Yeah. Oh, so good. Let's just understand, get to know your rock bottom point, Bernhard, so we can, because there's a lot of men out there that are suffering, and it's really good inspiration for them to see men as yourself who are, obviously in a great place, but to know your rock bottom point, where you came from.
Yeah. Rock bottom. 2 points. One of them was this one incident I shared when I was waking up in my bed crying. That was around late in my late 20s, something like that, maybe around Saturn return, something around that time. That was definitely, I was lost and hardly coming by. And the rock bottom happened. There have been various dark nights of the soul. There's not just one. But the other one I mentioned when I was, I remember in Hollywood, like typical living in the mid 90s with a bunch of musicians, 5 people living there, party house music. And my best friend I came with from Germany, he went back to Germany, and told me that day. So I lost like our whole dream, just kind of like, it was a big disillusionment moment. And the rock bottom, I remember, I was shooting up heroin, and I was sitting in the bathroom and just kind of like, I was throwing up because you get sick of it and all of that. And I was just like, kind of like, just sitting in my own shit, almost literally in a sense, and just completely giving up on life, And I realized in that moment too, okay, I can keep doing that. And it's just this, what I'm doing is just the closest to suicide. I might as well kill myself. Right. It's just, I don't have the balls to kill myself. That's why I'm doing that shit, with the smack and all of that. So that was, I remember clearly still in my mind, that was rock bottom. And it's interesting. And then the moment, I'm almost like, no, I can't do this anymore. Like I gotta like something else again. There's I feel I had some inner strength, some spirit guidance in a sense that helped me out of it, because I could have gone easily take a much darker road and not even be here anymore. There was certain moments I was close to death. So it was a rebirth process, but the ultimate rebirth process happened then when I gave that up. I actually met that's when a few weeks later, I met my mentor, who introduced me then not only to yoga and body work, but also to mushrooms. So I had my first mushroom trip, and that was kind of like a rebirth experience, the opposite almost of heroin, right? So kind of like becoming more in touch with my spiritual nature. That was definitely an initiation in itself, right? So that kind of like helped me to kind of recalibrate, so to speak, right? And then I remember getting yoga. What is yoga? And that was like, I don't think many people heard about yoga. That was again mid-90s or something. And then I got into that, and found rejoiced in life, so to speak, right? And then kind of like, okay, I can do it by myself. Like I have this vision to form a band. So I had this vision of creating this band, and actually manifested that. I found the band, found the singer, toured, recorded an album. So all of that happened. But there was a rebirth moment. I mean, there are several others, because there's in my life, in life, there's several stages, right? They go over, like you can even see it astrologically to the different cycles with Saturn return, Uranus opposition, Chiron, and all of that. But what we miss, I'm sure, for a lot of men, speaking in this culture, is like the initiation into manhood, right? Adulthood, from boy to man. We're missing the rite of passage. So my rite of passage happened actually when I met my mentor, and back in the days, there was my introduction to the rave culture. So the desert parties, right? Psychedelics, dancing under the full moon, raving through the night. And that kind of like, as much was drug fueled too, but more psychedelics, not the amphetamine or opiate style. But that was like initiation, kind of freeing, you know what I mean? Like an opening, like in this sense. And that introduced me more to the spiritual nature. I mean, in this context, I also took New Age pill at some point, right? But that was a big breakthrough. There have been other initiations with relationships, particular, like really bad breakups, that kind of stuff, where all my childhood wounding came up. All of that needed to be confronted. But I'm looking back, and we always, rock bottom is kind of like, we see it as something bad, but looking back, these rock bottom, really bad events in my life that nearly took me out, also relationship wise, were necessary lessons, necessary events that needed to happen, that led me to something much better. I don't know if it wouldn't have happened, you know what I mean? Because I already was not, you couldn't tempt me just with money and fame, these kind of things, because I already knew this is not bringing me anything, right? So a lot of people kind of take that carrot, so to speak. But I was looking for something more real, right? And, it's almost like a death rebirth experience that brings you closer to who you truly are. And there's always different stages, right? So that's why I say, for me, there's deep meaning in life in every event, and all these are lessons, right? The trap, then, my website, the subtitle is also Soul Embodiment and Transcending the Matrix. And the Matrix works on fear and works on self-diminishment, right? That keeps us from our true power, so to speak. And no meaning, and God is dead, and this atheist nihilistic view, right? But I see everything as a teaching function in that sense, right? Everything as if we can get out of the blame victim trap, all potential is open, right? And it's easy. I've been there in deep self-pity, you know what I mean? Like also back in the days, listening to grunge, like what was it? Alice in Chains, and the self-loathing and my pain and all of that, right? There can be an addiction to that as well, going too dark. But taking self-responsibility, that's really the key point, right? And self-responsibility also implies not to kind of have the illusion that you can do it by yourself either, because we need help. No one can just do the work by yourself. You cannot just do self-work by yourself. We need help and others. And ultimately, the help is divine. And there's a deeper flow, a deeper trust we can align ourselves with. So in that sense, ultimately, I found God through that, I've never been into like any religion, dogmatic religion like Christianity or anything like that, but more like, my true self, the divine within. But it wouldn't have been these rock bottom events were part of it. They needed to happen, right? To snap me out of my own delusion, basically.
Oh, so good. I have so many questions, but this is the most important one because I might forget the others. Men who see themselves as a victim. And as you said, this is such a pivotal hurdle to get over for anyone.
Yeah.
And I get you, Bernhard, but I really am a victim. Can you please talk to those men?
Well, it's a great question, by the way, because we all have I don't want to victim blame, that goes into new age territory. You attracted this because of your bad thoughts and all of that, right? The kind of law of attraction abuse. And there's some truth to it, but it has been way oversimplified and used for victim blaming. Sometimes, yes, we can be victims, horrendous victims sometimes, of abuse, physical abuse, who knows what, right? So that it's to be acknowledged. The key point is you don't want to stay in the victim state, right? You have the power to get out of it. And then if you really zoom out, then the mind cannot comprehend, because in my work, what I see, you can just all look at childhood. And then, if you just apply psychology by itself, then you always end up at childhood and maybe you blame your parents for something, kind of like, and then I have blamed my parents for sure and be mad. And that's something, that anger needs to be faced and confronted as well, But it's more about not staying in the state of the victim, because the state of the victim then always externalizes blames, right? It's a very disempowering place to be, actually, right? So to take self-responsibility, to acknowledge the pain, acknowledge to her that has happened. It's not to deny it, but hey, I know I can get out of it. There's a deeper lesson that in my true self, your true essence cannot be hurt. That's what I've also realized. Who you truly are on a deeper soul level cannot be touched by anything or anyone. And then goes even deeper when you really look, my wife, Laura, she's also an amazing astrologer, evolutionary astrology that looks deeper into karmic lessons, and you bring into past lives, karma, and that gets very complicated. The mind cannot grasp it, And then you have maybe chosen the setup. You've chosen your parents. You've maybe, who knows, how have you been in your past life based on the law of cause and effect. And I'm not, I'm not want to abuse the concept of karma, because that can be also oversimplified or be used for victim blaming, but it is a universal law that cannot be ignored, the law of cause and effect, how we, co-create reality mostly unconsciously. So we need to take responsibility for everywhere we are at, like we're giving a certain script where we're at, and we have to accept it. We have to accept everything as it is in the world. God didn't make a mistake. We have to accept reality as it is, which doesn't mean that we just go along with it, right? And just put up with abuse or injustice. But only when we face what is, can we make changes. And that's, for me, the true empowerment. As when we have been victimized, or man has something terrible has happened to you, acknowledge it first of all. Acknowledge the pain. Most of us, we don't acknowledge it. Right? We ignore it. There can be also disassociation. There can be deep. A lot of men I've worked with deal with tremendous internalized shame and guilt, toxic shame and guilt, right? That's a big issue in our world. A lot of highly successful people are becoming successful as a trauma response, because as a response to internalized guilt and shame. And internalized guilt and shame means basically that, when you make a toxic shame, that's what I'm talking about, right? Toxic shame happens when, for example, you make a mistake. A healthy person, like, oh, I made a mistake, I apologize, and move on. Internalized shame means you not only did you make a mistake, you think you are a mistake, right? I am a mistake. I am wrong. I am not good enough. You identify, and many men have been shamed also in childhood, from their own parents and all of that. So there's internalized shame that already, needs to be confronted, so to speak. But again, going back to what you said, it's acknowledging what happened, but not lingering in that. That's the key point.
That's great. Thank you, Bernhard. And I'd also like you to give a message to men who are in that place you were of, heroin and drugs and, like, as you said, maybe didn't have the courage to go ahead with a suicide, but were living a life that invited that. What can you say to those men to give them encouragement to start spiraling up?
What is the question, like in that, what to do when you're in that state, or what was the question?
Yeah. What can they do? What's the first steps they can take?
Well, it's really hard, like what I've learned, like everybody's so set up is so different. It's really, well, acknowledging first of all, right? I mean, that's been the thing. Like, for me, it's been just a reality check, right? To acknowledge, not to deny it. And then for me, what has worked is just also prayer. Like I had always a spiritual view, like, again, if this call is like, have this sincere call for help, then somehow help appears, but now usually not in ways you expect it. And also the way that God works, or the divine, also you still have to do the work. It's not, many of us, we look for a rescuer, you know what I mean? Or the opposite end, when we've, like, similar what happened to me in relationships, because, I project what I need to do for myself, I projected on women. So became the white knight, trying to rescue women, right? Like that kind of like unconscious power dynamic, saving the damsel in distress, right? When in fact, I needed to save myself first and foremost. So again, it's like, the most important part also getting of the shame cycle, it's allowing yourself to feel the feelings you're so afraid to feel. That's a key point. Because most of us people are afraid of feeling. That's why did I do drugs? Why did I do that? Because I was afraid of feeling, to make myself feel better. Anything can be an addiction, by the way, or, the way I define for addiction is anything you do repeatedly and compulsively in order to avoid feeling. Can be anything, can be the internet, social media, your phone, can be partying, can be working, right? Whatever it may be, right? Sex, shopping, all of that. So allowing yourself to feel, because our fear of feeling is way worse than actually feeling it. When I do my work, for example, I can give you an example. Whenever, like in the past, I would like something would come up, I feel agitated, you know what I mean? Like even little things. You can use everything in lessons. Let's say, for example, I get triggered by somebody on Facebook or whatever, people get triggered left and right. And so instead of like acting on the trigger and projecting back and like this asshole, whatever, blah, 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 and like, or in engaging in gossip, even just in your own mind and just trying to put the other person down, or even worse, like posting something, hold on, observe yourself. Observation is the first key. Like, be curious. Okay, why is this getting to me? What is this feeling? There's anger. Where is this coming from? Instead of blaming the other person for feeling angry, for example, what I do then is resist the urge to distract or go on social media, or resist the urge to smoke a joint or drink a beer, whatever, and sit with it. Sit with it. Sit down, breathe, close your eyes, and feel your body. The somatic approach, like I mentioned before, is key. Because whatever emotion we have, there's a somatic, bodily, physical sensation that corresponds to it, right? Tightness in the body. So it's very important to feel it. For example, I had that anger. So I felt like constriction in my heart, chest area, just a physical sensation. And then very important, you want to feel it, but don't let the mind interfere, because the mind still automatically wants to blame something for the way you feel, right? It wants to give a story. Oh, I feel like this because of this person or this and that or my parents. No. You need to learn to tell the mind to F off, don't interject, don't analyze, don't even try to fix it, don't try to change it. That's what I learned from doing bodywork for over 2 decades, right? The body holds everything, but you need it allowed to open up. You cannot do it by force, right? Even deep body work, or my specialty was deep body work, and I need to go very gentle in order to go deep, right? You cannot force yourself through it. So similar, when you do this process, you need to allow yourself to feel without the story, without analyzing, without trying to change it, without trying to fix it. And that's very, very hard, especially for men, right? We want to fix things. When I'm like, this needs to change, I need to fix. Which was also challenging for me, especially with my German mind, right? So just to sit it. So that's when the magic happens in your body. Like you can, like the healing, everything is right here. And I remember this anger, like I was angry, you know what I mean? And then, it came up in my throat and I wanted to scream. So I screamed. There was anger. I needed to scream, like just let it out. Primordial. I don't know where it was coming from. Could have been childhood, my past life. I don't care. I don't analyze. You don't need the story for healing. Very important to understand. You don't need to know intellectually what happened. You just need to experience the feeling, the emotion. So, and then I was dancing it out. Dancing has been a very like ecstatic dance, 5 rhythm dance has helped me a lot to process a lot of, my trauma and the feelings as well, over the years. So then I put some heavy music on, was dancing out, but then I felt still something is stuck. So I sat down again. So after I processed that anger, for example, a lot of men have anger issues or unconscious anger, but anger is still just a surface emotion, right? So we need to embrace the anger. But once you go there, there's something underneath it. And what's underneath there? Sadness, shame, guilt. So these are difficult emotions to process or face. But it was easier once I made the process, had this heart opening, and I started all of a sudden the sadness. I started crying intensely. Allow yourself to cry. Why? Especially men, we had this whole boys don't cry culture and all of that, right? And now it's been, this is a whole other story. Now we have even gone the other way again with this whole men gotta toughen up more and don't be such beta male. I'm on the side, and I'm totally against labeling beta male or alpha male. I think does more harm than any good. Just my own personal experience. We need to go beyond these labels. But anyway, I was allowing myself to cry, and then in that moment, then something deeper opened up, and I felt my true essence beyond my personality, something else, like my deeper spiritual connection to myself, right? So that kind of that's a process that is available to all of us. We just need to allow ourselves to happen. See, most of all, when we are in pain, when we are whatever psychological emotion, we want to get rid of it, we want to make a change, we don't accept it. But to surrender to it, to allow yourself to feel it, that opens up, a portal for deep healing, deep release. And I'm not saying that the process I did can happen like this, that takes also work, practice, a lot of tools, and also working with others, getting help and all of that to learn it, right? And but again, the only way out is in and through. That's been my experience anyway.
Oh, wonderful. What happens to emotions when they are suppressed? Are you do you agree with the theory that they're out in the mental and emotional fields, and they manifest in the physical body as ailments, as illness, as stiffness, restrictions, disease? Can you
Yes.
speak on that, please?
Yes, absolutely. I know this for my body work as well. Again, I've literally worked on thousands of bodies and seen so many bodies, and the body tells me more about their whole lives than whatever they tell me, mentally, intellectually. So I've gotten good at reading bodies as well. And yes, you're correct. The body is the biography of our life, and tension is not just, there can be tension because of, working on the computer, on the desk, car ride, whatever, sitting, part of that. But most of our attention is where we hold on to feelings we haven't fully let go of or experienced. And then it becomes unconscious. And the ultimate manifestation of unprocessed trauma or shadow aspects and wounds is cancer, right? So that needs to be acknowledged as well. Actually, Dr. Gabor Mate has great work done around that, if you're familiar with his work, linking trauma as well, and even to cancer and all of this, like the body holds score basically, right? But even doesn't have to be as severe as cancer. But anyway, we have tension, we're holding on. It's like something is, the way I see it, our body is infused with chi, with life force. It's this living organism, has its own intelligence. It's not this mechanical thing, right? So wherever we have tension in the body means the muscle is always contracting. It's always working, right? It's almost a waste of energy, right? And qi cannot flow freely through it. So over time, it will then create even more illness and disease, and the tissue it can get even worse. But absolutely, wherever we have tension in our body is related for the most part to all kinds of unconscious stuff, right? We not only like childhood, I'm not even just talking about childhood trauma, the past or even past life stuff, everything, as Reggie Ray would say, a great meditation teacher, my wife introduced me to him, we hold karma in the body, right? Everything that happened to us, we hold in the body on some level. It's ingrained in us. But also everyday stress, right? Even when we in the morning, you read an email that kind of upset you, like, and feel it, but you definitely didn't always have to fully feel it. Boom, it gets pushed into the unconscious, right? Or however we present ourselves to people, because we don't want to, we always want to appear happy and successful and look at me kind of thing, especially social media. We want to also present our best selves. And then we suppress a lot of quote unquote negative emotions because we tell ourselves, oh, it's not spiritual to feel this, the spiritual bypassing, or, how will others see me? We're very concerned about how other people see us and think of us, right? So we suppress. So it all gets stuck back in the body. That's why for me also, like this on the self-care level, for the past over 20 years now, I receive bodywork at least now once a month, at least, ideally twice a month, chiropractor, as well as acupuncture, deep body work, yoga, all of the body mind practices, qigong. This is like self-care 101 for me, right? To really, and then also, like I mentioned, there's meditations, these somatic meditation to allow yourself feeling. And that's the way we work through it. But especially I think it's hard for men to go there, because men, I don't want to stereotype, but generally speaking, men are more in their heads, right? Women are more connected to the body. The feminine aspect of consciousness actually is the body. The male aspect of consciousness is the mind, is the intellect, right? So we need to fuse both body and mind.
Can you speak of Qigong? Because we haven't had anyone yet to speak of that on Heart Warriors. Can you please explain what it is? Talk to men about the benefits and how they might find a good teacher if that's what they feel to do.
Yeah, Qigong in a nutshell is an ancient Chinese self-healing modality. It's what I would call it. Qi really is life force. Gong means work. So you're almost doing energy. You're doing energy work on yourself through certain movements. There are different lineages with different kinds of forms, but it helps to really circulate Qi, your life force, to get rid of stagnant, toxic Qi, energetically, and kind of fuel yourself up with potent Qi, life force, so to speak. So these are certain movements that generate Qi, or kind of move around Qi, and it's very, very powerful. And the key point of Qigong or any of these practices is consistency, right? So I've basically done the same practice for almost 20 years now, different movements here and there, but for the most part the same. But it's just like, it's self-care, right? I think in China it's very much part of their culture, and some of people grow very old there because they know their Qigong. So it's it's the way I see it, this is just self-care, basic self-care. I take all the mysticism out of these practices because it's just like, I focus on the essence, and this is just part of self-care. But definitely I recommend, I had a few teachers learning it from somebody, because there's certain movements and you have to have a certain posture, right? And I think it's becoming more popular, so that I'm sure wherever you are, there are ways to find it. Again, if you really want it and seek it, the teacher will appear. That's definitely what I can attest to. So that's one of my favorite. It's actually very good also because it's very slow movements, right? Usually what I see, men, they want to get into like, all kinds of workout training and kind of like resistance training, and that's fine and good. It's all part of it, but Qigong is more yin practice. It's slowing down. It really affects the nervous system. So if you're dealing with fight or flight, trauma, anxiety, that's a great practice to regulate the nervous system. So that's really why I like Qigong. It really calms the nervous system.
So good. And there's probably even, YouTube channels and things that,
Oh, absolutely. Nowadays you can look it up, but I still recommend to work with a teacher in person who can also help and correct you, because you cannot, it's really like some practices are very powerful only if you do the posture correctly. That's the key point. But yeah, get a taste of it on YouTube, anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. And can you now also speak of yoga and men and yoga? Because speak to why men should, if they,
Really?
explore
Well,
yoga.
well, as you speak of that, here's the thing. Like, I've started yoga in the 90s, and definitely I used to go to yoga class. I mean, here, first of thing, there's yoga, the Western yoga, right? Which is the asana practice, right? The physical, the postures and all of that, which is a tiny fraction of yoga, right? Yoga itself is an ancient esoteric practice to bring you closer to God. Yoga means union with God. So the majority of people here in the West, I think they use yoga as a fitness, which is fine and good, to take care of your body. But there's way more to the yoga, essentially, as a spiritual practice than just the asana physical practice. But having said that, I started out in LA when it all started out, when I used to live there. But I was definitely always in the minority as a man, mostly women, mostly females, right? Same with Qigong and many other, even bodywork and all of that. And on that note, I kind of am reminded of the work I do, like, or even with my wife, Laura, we do online courses, right? Embodied soul awakening, where we do combine in and outer, where we go deep into psychological processes, trauma work, somatic work. Also, I teach Qigong, even online. She teaches yoga, meditation, breath work. And we have done already 9 of these programs over the past few years. But literally 80% women signed up and 20% men. Also 80% women apply, only 20% men, thousands of applications. And I look back when I used to go to retreats or host retreats myself, vast majority of women. So there's interesting that men, like, I just want to bring that up. There's some reluctance to be, to engage in these practices, right? I think women are more open to go deeper, in that sense. I've also known a lot of women tend to, quote unquote, complain why their man or men are not open to these practices or go deeper in their own processes, right? So it's interesting. I think, I don't want to stereotype, but there's some reluctance. I mean, maybe cultural, society-wise, people have a hard time maybe when open up to deeper vulnerability, because maybe they think it's a weakness. They equate vulnerability with weakness, right? That kind of thing. And maybe the climate today, nowadays, we have this whole polarity between the woke left, the beta males, and the conservative right, with their, what do you call it? Kind of like polarity teachings and workouts, and kind of like, the traditional man needs to come back. And I think, like I said before, both extremes are missing the point. So I don't know. It's very interesting. Like, money can be an issue if money, let's put it this way. I'm definitely seeing women maybe take more priority, invest in these kind of things into themselves more than men, right? Because a lot of the self-care going to this work also costs money, but men maybe have different priorities. I don't know. But ultimately, I think men of men also maybe, I want to get out of, because from my perspective, it goes beyond gender. There's always something to be said about soul age, right? And certain people, once the soul is ready to make its call, it will make its call, right? And that the soul develops over lifetimes and whatnot, right? But right now, I think in the world we live in, I mean, it's so politically charged as well. And I'm not the one to take this extreme or these other extreme. But we live in the world where we live in a mentalized world, right? Where the male aspect of consciousness is kind of worshipped. And when I say male aspect of consciousness, I don't mean gender. Women can fall into it. A lot of feminists are way more, quote unquote, masculine than feminine, right? When I say male aspect of consciousness, we're living, and this is reinforced through technologies, we'll mostly live in the head, disconnected from the body, right? And men, I think, are more prone to that automatically, right? And they're more designed for, and that's great, but we need to use just the mind as a tool, not as the master. So for a lot of men, the journey is back into the body, is the embodiment process, is allowing themselves to connect more to the inner feminine. That's really what it comes down to, right? The alchemical marriage of the inner male and female, which really is from Jungian perspective also anima animus integration. It's huge, it's big, right? Unfortunately, I see a lot of wounded men and traumatized men kind of very much drawn to these polarity teachings as well. And I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, but for me, it's a very superficial personality role playing that doesn't help and can only make things worse. It's kind of trying to build an artificial personality of how you should behave, as a dominant man and leaders to get your submissive woman and all this kind of stuff. And can do a lot of damage, more good and more bad than any good I've ever seen in the long run, right? So we need to get way beyond this outer development, but look more into the inner development, right? And I know for myself, I've worked with thousands of people over the years, so we cannot stereotype generalize. Everybody is such a unique human being. You see it in an astrology natal chart, right? In my natal chart, I have some very strong male placements, Mars and Aries, right? That doesn't get any more masculine than that but then I have very feminine placements like Moon in Cancer, right? So everybody is such a mixture of different things and can manifest in different ways, right? So we need to really allow, how can I say, not kind of, there can be a recipe that fits all, right? Everybody needs a unique approach, right? And also for whatever man or woman, it doesn't matter, right? But first there must be the willingness to go there. So, there's another rule in healing work. You cannot help anyone who's not willing to help themselves, right? So unless you come to this realization yourself, nothing will do it, right? You cannot make your partner to do anything, right? That's not going to happen. And again, it goes back to what we talked earlier before. Why did I get into all of this? Because of my own suffering, because I didn't find a way out, right? And some people, maybe they have they have more defense mechanisms, or even more quote unquote success in the material world that kind of keeps them going and keeps them from the complete breakdown. Or maybe they need a few lifetimes, as it's called in Buddhism, until they have totally exhausted their desires and turn inward, right? So again, it's hard to generalize, but why? I don't think it's not that every man should go to yoga. I just know that works for me, right? Absolutely. I just to each their own, and but also I want to see, again, the question is what I bring out to men: what is your intention in life? See, what is your goal? What is an aim in life? That's what I ask people. That's what I ask my clients or at our retreats. That's what I ask anyone. What do you really want? What is your aim? That's you want to need to know. And that can open up a whole can of worms, because then I add another question, like I said before. Okay, so where's the desire coming from? Who are you? Who in you wants this and why? Right? And I'm not trying to get into an intellectual process like over-analyzing, right? But into a deeper process to really question everything, because we mistake our conditioned ego personality for the soul. We mistake all kinds of things for our soul purpose. What we think is we engage in spiritual bypassing and all of that. And it goes back to the question, especially in this day and age, when we talk about, heart warriors and all that, ultimately, what is your intent? The ultimate purpose of your soul is to awaken. That's all that is. Once you unite with the divine, its joy, its true essence, I know for my own experience, doesn't depend on anything external. It doesn't depend on the perfect partner, on the perfect job, on any success, quote unquote, out there, So that doesn't mean to deny the material world, right? This is not the point. We not want to abuse spirituality in this whole you need to be poor and have no desires and be celibate. That's not what I'm talking about at all. It's just question who you are, question what you want, and then through this kind of subtractive process, you come more to the truth and the essence of who you really are, and then really know what you want and what you want to do. That's really what comes down to it. I'm not the one, in my work, I'm not the one to tell people what they should be doing. Even in my work, I give suggestions. Here, try this out. Why not that? But I'm not in a position to tell anyone what they should be doing. We need to get out of the should thing as well. That's a trap in itself.
Yeah. How would you describe the traits of healthy masculinity, a healthy man, and where does the heart come into it?
When I think of healthy masculine, I just write a thing of integration, integrated human being, And a healthy masculine has also integrated his feminine part, in the sense that I'm not this by gender, I mean this in yin and yang terms of energetics, right? Integrated. And what was the second part of the question?
Where does the heart come into?
Oh, the heart. The heart comes in, like, for me, is the heart centered, meaning like that's for me the connection to soul. And see it in Buddhism and Sri Aurobindo integral yoga. The soul is seated right behind the heart, right? So that's for me the heart centeredness is not, that's an entry point also to deeper compassion, empathy. Do you see yourself in others, right? Not blind compassion, right? I think that can be easily mistaken. You want to keep boundaries up, as a warrior as well. You need to be able to say no as well. That can be an act of love, by the way, to say no, not always say yes, yes, yes in this codependent fashion. We need to be able to say no. But the heart comes in when we really like also, where we can only engage the heart in the sense when we are also really connected to who we truly are on a deeper level. That's the way I see it, right? But you cannot fake it. It needs to be authentic in that sense. And for me, the heart-centeredness is not an emotion. It's not a feeling. It's a way of being, of living. And sometimes we are better connected. You see in my own life, there's moments I'm more connected to it than other days. It can happen any day because I'm not enlightened. I'm not fully awake. I have my days. I'm down and get triggered. I'm annoyed, right? I can be just harsh sometimes. My German nature can be a bit direct as well, but it's also not this fluffy, overly, like this overly emotional, pretentious kind of like, hey, look how heart-centered I am kind of thing. That's when the ego hijacks this as well, right? There needs a deep authenticity. I think true heart-centeredness comes when you're connected to your true self, your soul being, your essence. That's how it shines through.
Yeah. So authenticity, when a man finds his authentic self.
Yeah, authentic. But here's the thing. Authenticity is also misused. Many people are like, oh, I'm going to be authentic, but they mistake their authenticity for all kinds of neurosis, shadow projections, and trauma responses and entitlements. This is not being authentic. You're just being a dick. Excuse my French, right? So this is just mistaking your wounded, neurotic, ego conditioned personality for authenticity. That's not authenticity. Authenticity is when you connect to your true essence, your true self, which is not the ego personality, right? It doesn't identify with anything. And that takes work to truly connect and authentically come from that place. Yeah. So that's the difference. Excuse my French, I didn't know.
No, that's fine. You're being authentic, right?
I guess so. Yeah.
Bernhard, we've got about half an hour left. Now, you've got such a broad range of knowledge and wisdom. What needs to be brought into this conversation to talk to men?
Yeah, I think, and what I see for men in general, it is really, we're not talking about hardware, it's a spiritual warrior, right? And for me, it's what I see in my life, I can bring from my experience, what I've been driving for is really combining the inner and outer work. Both needs to go hand in hand. And outer work also make an effort to understand what's going on in the world, right? To stand up as warriors, to speak out, especially over the past 3 years. I've seen a lot of people, I'm not going to mention any names in the so-called spiritual community who didn't say shit, excuse my French again, but at some point you need to also give the lie what it deserves, which is the truth. And let conscience speak. Act out of conscience, not what you think, what will you get the most clients or attention or popularity. There's a difference. Let conscience speak first, right? Before our own egoic self-interest. I'm not saying that don't need to take care of ourselves. Absolutely. We need to be strategic sometimes, but we need more courage, authentic courage. That's the key point for men. And I'm not talking courage about just like, screaming, kind of like, in terms of anything physically, it's about a certain presence, right? And giving a voice to truth, right? In your own unique way. And don't feed that matrix program, because the matrix program is to silence you, not to speak out and all of that, right? So as men, we need to be more role models, right? Especially for the younger generations, for your children and all of that. You don't want to look back in your life and then your grandchild asks you, so where you've been around this time, what did you say, what you didn't say, So courage is the one thing, and it implies to understand what's happening in the world, understanding of the matrix, right? And then the inner work, right? To come more deeper in alignment and combining the inner work And it can be difficult. I'm not taking myself out of the equation, but for me to be a mature, healthy man, I mean, again, they're different. How can I say it? Because again, I don't want to fall into the trap of like how I think men should be, or give like a certain recipe, because everybody is different. It's again what you're interested in. If people are more, everybody is a different driving force. Like I mentioned before, some people are more interested in self-actualization, and that's fine and good. And maybe that's also needed. We need to actually have a healthy ego, integrated ego, and self-actualize before we can go into deeper spiritual work as well, right? But there's a whole different process than going into deeper esoteric spiritual work, right? We then dismantle all of that again and come in line with something higher. But ultimately, it needs to go both together, psychological and spiritual work, I feel, in this day and age, right? But I feel in this day, what we need more authenticity, more originality, right? I see, especially nowadays, a lot of like copycats imitating, pretentiousness. Like authenticity also implies originality and creativity. And you can only find this the more you connect again to yourself, true essence. And not trying to play like a role or something, that kind of more, it's easy to see through for a lot of people, right? So it goes back to this authenticity, which you can only find in your true self-being and your uniqueness. Because once you connect it to your uniqueness, your unique expression of what the divine wants to express through you, then any competition and comparison falls out of the window, right? Because we all have something beautiful and unique to contribute. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah. How do you define freedom? What does that mean for you?
Freedom. That's a good question. Freedom for me personally means freedom from my own compulsions, from my own desires, from my mechanical behaviors, from my programs, from my attachments. I said this already. From anything that is unconsciously driving me. Freedom I only find in God, in the divine. No attachment, no compulsion, no driven, no dependent on anything external for my inner joy. That's freedom. And that's a tall order. And I'm not saying that I'm there yet. I'm just saying I'm just comparing it to what freedom mostly, there's freedom, people like freedom of speech, freedom of this, sovereignty, we need to be sovereign, no government, financial independence, freedom from this and that, all fine and good. But the question always is, I ask, you're striving for this external sovereignty, it's external freedom, but how free are you from your own, conditioning, your own programming, your own desires, and all of that, your compulsion? Because unless you have kind of freedom from that, there's no true freedom, right? And the only freedom I find is in my true self, in essence, in God, in the divine, right? That's self-contained. Nobody can touch that. Nobody can touch it. Not even death can take it away. Nobody can imprison that, right? No force, no nothing can get to it. That's what true freedom is, right? And I think that's what we all of us are looking for unconsciously, but we look at mostly outside of ourselves, externally.
How important is mission or purpose to a man?
I would say definitely, obviously very important. Definitely, without purpose, meaning, my life, I wouldn't. Yeah, my life had always been purpose and meaning, always driven by a vision, right? That be it, I started out with playing drums, to the bodywork, to the work I do now, always vision, purpose. But the vision and purpose was never based, for me personally, what I realize is that purpose or mission is not a job you do. It's nothing you do. It's not your art. It's not your work. It's not your services. These are all labels the ego loves to identify with to make itself feel special and important. That's not what purpose is. Ultimately, like I mentioned before, your ultimate purpose is your soul development, right? Wanting to come to the front, how it develops and learns its lessons and manifests its gift through you, acting as a conduit for divine uniquely through you. And yes, and it can express itself uniquely through a certain vocation or art or work you do, absolutely, but that is not your purpose. Because it changed. When I was in my 20s, I thought, oh, my purpose is playing drums. I'm going to play drums. That's my purpose. And I did it. And all of a sudden, no, my purpose changed. Now I'm a body worker. I'm a healer, body worker. Now I'm a writer. Now I'm doing, and so, the mind tries to identify purpose into a box, but it is not that. So purpose, again, like I mentioned before, you can only connect on a deeper level, connecting to your true essence and self, but the ego can easily hijack that. And what I find is, it goes back to Joseph Campbell's work, which the Heroes of the 1,000 Faces, mythology has done great work, the hero's journey. And he always talked about following your bliss. And that's what I've done. Following your bliss is kind of like invites the hero into the adventure, into the unknown. And that's where you need to like follow, and there will be all kinds of resistance, fear. You got to get out of your discomfort zone, but you won't find your deeper purpose, that adventure, if you don't do it. You get just stay in your comfort zone. But that bliss follow is also, as Joseph Campbell said, and I can speak of my experience as well, it is something you do which you give so much passion, love. You do it for just the love of doing it, right? And not because you have a certain idea, oh no, I could make, shit a lot of money out of this, I could capitalize on that. No reward whatsoever. And also no regard how people would perceive it, no need for attention or fear of how people think about it. In a sense, it's almost going back to the true joy of the inner child, right? When you played as an inner child, as a little kid, you were so immersed, you loved it for doing, you didn't care what other adults thought about it when you're really immersed in it, nor did you think about an outcome. So that's how I've seen you're on the right track for your deeper purpose. There's something that gives you so much joy and fulfillment that you do it even if you wouldn't get paid for it, and even if people wouldn't pay any attention, which doesn't imply that you shouldn't get reimbursed for it. I'm not saying that. That's a whole other distortion, right? But I'm just saying the deeper driving force needs to go beyond these external expectations we have.
Very good. Thank you. From your clients and from what you're observing in the collective, what's the biggest wound for our men at the moment? What are they struggling with the most?
Couple of things. One of them I've worked, shame, big one. A lot of men I've worked with, especially nowadays in age, especially younger men, is porn addiction. Which we also need to address. Also, shout out to all women. Please do not shame men for watching porn. I see, unfortunately, a lot of women shaming, about this. There's definitely, it's almost the elephant in the living room, especially nowadays, right? But we have to understand that for number one, porn is a symptom. It's not the cause, of this whole sexual distortion, what's happening in the world and all of that, right? And it's sort of a trauma response, dopamine and all of that. And I don't know one man, including myself, and I've worked with thousands, who has not watched at least a little bit of porn with one time in their life, right? So I see a lot of men struggling with that, almost like, especially if relationships struggle nowadays. More and more people are single. Women are more single, men are more single. And it's almost this paradox. We're more connected than ever in the internet, but people are alone, right? And hence they go to this virtual gratification, right? So that's what people are showing. And if anybody's struggling with, the guilt and shame can eat you up, right? So don't feed the lie. It's like, it's not easy sometimes to overcome, but I'm saying that's kind of like based on experience of what I've worked with a lot of men. And we need to get out of that shame spiral, so to speak, right? And then I see a lot of men have, feeling a lot of pressure from expectations, right? Women don't know how much men are under pressure, especially nowadays. You're supposed to be the provider, a leading man, be there be there for at any time and show strength, but also vulnerability and understanding and tuning in, while you're going to work and provide for everyone. There's a lot of pressure on men, So we also need support and nurturing, support as well. And nurturing, how can I say, not just touch, but just nurturing energy in the sense from the opposite sex, and I'm not talking about sex or anything like that, but more kindness in the sense, right? Because again, we in this weird climate, and again, I'm not buying. We have this weird leftist woke stuff, and then this right, Andrew Tate kind of type of guy, man, everybody wants to be and whatnot. To each their own, but none of that. There's in both extremes, there's integration missing. There's conscience missing, right? There's more vulnerability missing, more true authenticity coming from the self missing, not just this ego pretense and all of that. So also acknowledging that men are under a lot of pressure, right? And really, not, again, I see so much oversimplification, and all the work becomes more nuanced, because in our work especially, I see this, if you go really deep, if you really deeply apply shadow work, Jungian psychology, animus integration, really go deep into trauma work, attachment therapy, internal family systems therapy, if you go deeper into somatic work, and let alone spiritual work, and then combine it even with astrology, look at your astrology chart, it becomes so nuanced and so complex. We really have to more compassion for each other, because things are not that black and white. I think a lot of people easily fall into black and white thinking, right? And everybody has such a rich history, not only in regards to childhood, but the whole past lives. And that's why we're here where we're at right now. And what I've seen as well, like even within myself, or talking to other men, is that it's both ways. We need to allow things happen, but we also need a certain willpower to go there. That's the thing for men as well, I feel. Not specifically men, like almost like I mentioned before. Remember when we talked about how more women, open to this work than men, way more. And the women in a sense have a more of warrior spirit. Okay, let's go there, right? I'm going to let's just like almost the feminine warrior, which I really appreciate. And even my wife as well, and man could use that more as well, in a sense, kind of that warrior spirit, not only externally going to battle, out there, but the inner warrior, the battle within, to fight the war within yourself. That's where the will comes in, to confront that, right? But there are different hurdles to overcome, and again, everybody is different, especially so in this day and age. But I see a lot of pressure a lot of men are under as well, in this day and age, and that kind of like being put upon them, they put on themselves as well, right? Obviously through cultural, social conditioning and all of that, comparing themselves to others, and shaming anyone doesn't help. That's what I want to really put out there. The moment we start to shame people, that's actually your own unacknowledged internalized shame projected onto the other person. That's your own shame, right? So we need to be more mindful about that.
Yeah. For men who have acknowledged a porn addiction, are looking for some way that they can, break that addiction, what would you say to those men?
The way I work with it, first of all, like acknowledge it first, and then also wean yourself off. It's like, not, some people can do it cold turkey, some maybe just try, maybe just once a week, you know what I mean? Then also I have to say, not all porn is created equal, like, are you what, there's a lot of insane stuff out there. So are you really in some very dark, deep end that's, can be more disturbing, more help is needed? Or are you just watching just regular one-on-one, very whatever, I mean, I want to, similar with drugs, not all drugs are created equally. There's a difference between, are you injecting heroin or just smoking a joint? So that needs to be considered first of all, right? And then don't beat yourself up over, you know what I mean? Like, first of all, I like how Gabor Mate works. So he works a lot with addiction as well, because porn is an addiction, right? We need to get out of the shame out of the equation, right? Because the shame cycle keeps it feeding itself. So acknowledge doing it, and then, here's the irony: once you allow yourself actually to do without the shame, then naturally actually there will be more a disconnection from it. I've noticed within myself, right? And again, the work needs to be done holistically, right? Everything is interrelated. We talked about the body-mind connection. What we do in our work and even our coaching programs, group programs, we base it on this fourfold approach of holistic self-work on all levels: physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually. So same with any addiction or porn addiction needs to be approached on all levels. Like, for example, when you feel sexually excited or whatnot, maybe use the energy, use the willpower to go out for a run or do something more physically, for example, right? But I can guarantee there's maybe the trauma response. There's something else behind it as well. So there needs to be deeper inner child work and all of that combined. And the more you connect your true essence to your true self, the more easily you will reject actually porn or any of that kind of stuff, because it doesn't resonate with you anymore. You kind of won't actually get excited by it anymore. That's the ideal state you want to be in. But first we acknowledge it and get out of the shame spiral. I mean, one book I can highly recommend for any man is by John Bradshaw, called Healing the Shame That Binds You. So that I can definitely, that's a good deep dive. And he really combines deep psychological work also with spiritual work, you know. And I've had men they had actually great results with just the 12-step program as well. That has its place as well. To each their own. But first, we need to acknowledge and getting out of this shame spiral. That's the key point. That's where the healing needs to happen.
Yeah. How does a man who's in an intimate relationship with a woman, how does porn affect his relationship with his woman?
Well, it's kind of like in the sense, in a way, it's like you bring in another person into the relationship, not just a person, but I see it from an energetic occult perspective as well, right? So part of my work, I go deeper into occult work, hidden work, meaning the hyperdimensional aspect, entities, right? So, archonic entities, occult hostile forces, the other beings that feed off of all the sexual lust that work through people. Now, what happens, what's known from an occult level, when you have sexual fantasies or, indulge in porn, you start to create actually an entity based on these projected thought forms. You create, it's even one of my teachers who taught me Qigong, also with sexual Qigong, warned of watching porn because you're making a contact with another entity. You're starting to create an entity because of this projected sexual lust, and that kind of reinforces that sexual desire, right? So you create another entity, right? So then you have another presence with you in the relationship, right? And that will affect the relationship just on that level, energetic level, right? You can see it even from a very basic physical level that you're also quote unquote cheating because you're not, bringing in another person. But for the most part, it will harm the relationship mostly on an emotional and sexual level for sure, right? It depends on the relationship. There are women who also go off on porn as well, right? And again, to each their own, free will and all of that. But what kind of love are we talking about? What kind of relationship? What is the foundation of the relationship? Everything needs to be put into question, and why is actually, instead of then blaming the guy, by the way, that he's watching porn, so something must be off in the relationship within as well, right? So what's really going on there? So there's a reason why he's doing that and something he's not getting within the relationship. That doesn't necessarily mean he's not getting the sex, but there's something else, right? Most often I've seen a man who really addicted to porn is a trauma response for something else that happened in childhood, right? There's nothing to do with the woman they're in actually, right? But, it's definitely not conducive for any conscious relationship, right? Or at the very least, if it's there, it should be out in the open, right? The moment you hide something like this from your partner, that kind of ends up can go downward spiral, and because it will affect everything else in the relationship eventually.
Okay, great. What else did you want to bring into this conversation, Bernhard?
No, I mean, all I can say for men, again, like I made a post about this on Facebook a few weeks ago, again, to step up more to the plate, to go more into the inner work, because again, I've worked with so many people over the years, and I see we have another round, our 10th round of our 14-week program, Embodied Soul Awakening, where we approach the fourfold approach of holistic self-work, right? Going deep into inner and outer work, psychological inner work, somatic inner work, spiritual inner work, in context, what's happening in the world, universal laws, and all of that, understanding the matrix. But I look, it's by application only, and I got all these discovery calls booked for clients, and it's like 9 out of 10 are women. So we need more men to step up to the place. So that's what I'm saying. It's not, in general, I see this with other people, other coaches, other therapists have the same, so there's something within man, that they don't sign up or, and it's not about signing up to our program, just being more open to this kind of work, right? Because all this externalizing, is just being open to them, because that will not only benefit themselves, it will benefit their relationships. And there's, a lot of conscious women who are yearning to be around men like this. I recently looked a short video of David Dieter. He made a good point that there are way more conscious women nowadays than men. And I can see that, right? So men are kind of like underdeveloped in that sense, right? And I'm again at the danger of overgeneralizing, which I don't want to do. There's always exceptions, obviously, right? But there has been, we're dealing also, men have been very, we know that the feminine has been kind of suppressed and all of that, and punished and traumatized, but men as well, right? We see it even nowadays, what happened with feminism and how men are being treated now, and all of that on that level. But it goes even further back. I think we're just in general in a crisis of consciousness, beyond gender, and I really feel we need to go beyond this gender war we always identify with, so to speak, of man, women, and like what man should do and women should do and all these kind of things, and find more the truth of our being, and really come into this polarization within ourselves. That's where the true polarity work for me is my internal alchemical marriage of the male and female, the anima, animus within myself, right? And the more it comes balance with you, the more I have a more harmonious relationship with my wife and the world as well. That's really where it's at. But for men, you guys need to step up to the plate, right? And invest into yourselves. Not only I'm talking with your will, with your effort, with the decision, and understand how necessary it is. But again, it cannot be forced upon, right? And like going around circle, most people only learn when they hit rock bottom, and some people don't hit rock bottom this lifetime, maybe next lifetime, right? And because I have to say, really now, we need to get out of this kind of looking for a solution externally too much, right? That's the key point. We need to, as men, need to take responsibility, right, in many levels, and need to step up to the plate. But again, the inner work is so much key, and that's what I feel is mostly missing.
Yeah, beautiful. You did touch on meditation. Is that a big part of your practice, your life? Could you talk on meditation, please?
Meditation, two forms of meditation. There's passive meditation and dynamic meditation. So passive meditation I usually do in the morning when I just wake up, have my glass of water, and then sit and meditate, And I'm usually recently now influenced. I have two approaches. One is somatic meditation, which I learned from Reggie Ray, which my wife's teacher. It's based on Tibetan Buddhism, but brings in somatic work to really scan your body, to feel your body. Similar to the exercise I shared with you at the beginning, right? Or earlier on about feeling the tension in your body and just observing, right? To get into the body and see what arises. So that's one. The other one I also incorporate, I'm very much a student of integral yoga, Sri Aurobindo, right? So that's about really having a sincere aspiration, conscious aspiration to the divine, right? To align with divine will. So I have a prayer, internal prayer of like, whatever thy will be. It's not about what I want, my ego and all of this, is but what is your will wanting to work through me? And it's nothing external, because I know the divine will is what my true self wants anyway. But it's tricky because the ego always interferes, but there's an aspiration in this meditation, right? And also part of it is also detaching from thought, obviously, right? And trying to get more of a still mind. And connecting, then I have another meditation also based on integral yoga, heart meditation, based on the heart, the psychic being, the soul being, and kind of just put my intention there. That kind of like gets my day going. And then dynamic meditation is more throughout the day, when I remind myself, hey, again, offering to the divine what I'm doing. This is, I'm constantly in prayer, basically, in that sense, or need to, as Gurdjieff would say, trying to remember myself, meaning remember myself, not going off and daydreaming, but be conscious and present in what I do. When I do, one of my favorite things, ironic, is doing the dishes. My wife likes that because it gets me I use it as a meditative practice, right? To be in the present and just do that, it gets me very grounded. And then my intention is to really approach everything in life like that, right? And be more self-absorbed. Sometimes I'm not present. I'm out of it. Like I said, I get triggered. I daydream. I'm out of body. That's normal. But bringing it back to this dynamic meditation where I always remember myself or offer it to the divine. So that's my approach, and that can shift from day to day.
So good. Bernhard, you've got a podcast. Can you please talk about that and let people know where they can find you?
Yes, I have a podcast which I co-host with my wife, Laura. The podcast is called The Cosmic Matrix Podcast, which you can find anywhere on iTunes, Spotify and all of that if you type in the Cosmic Matrix. And basically, Laura and I, we talk about many different topics from a psychological perspective, psychology, spirituality, the occult, esotericism, hyperdimensional realities, similar to the topics I talk about on my website. Sometimes I have also guest on there, here and there, but most is my wife and me. You can find also all episodes on my website, veilofreality.com. The second hour actually is 2 hours. The first hour of each episode is for the public on all podcast outlets. The second hour is only for members, and you can get a membership on my website. And the reason is because in the second hour, especially with the quote unquote climate out there in this world, we go into topics we cannot necessarily talk about in public outlets, including YouTube and others, because we might get we have gotten censored, canceled and all of that. So having that host ourselves gives us the freedom to talk about deep topics can be completely free. So it's a lot of, we just recorded episode number 97 or 98. So it's a lot of episodes. And again, you can find more about on my website, veilofreality.com, including lots of articles. I've been writing over 60 articles as well on there about various topics, videos. I've made some films. And yeah, there's also, we offer, last but not least, our flagship 14-week in-depth group coaching program, Embodied Soul Awakening, which the 10th round, we start December 26th in a few weeks. And for anyone who wants to find out more about it, especially men, go to thattimeoftransition.com, and it's by application only. And it's limited to 35 people. And yeah, that's where you can find me.
Oh, wonderful. We'll put all those links underneath in the description. What would you like to wrap up with, Bernhard? Final words?
Yeah, I mean, like for me, the final words I like to say, rejoice, because these are intense times, but exciting times to be alive. This is a huge opportunity. What's happening, there's a ferment, with all this friction, with all this chaos, I'm actually having personally a great time in that sense, because everything I've been writing about for the past 20 years, finally people are kind of listening to it. And I'm a Plutonian person, like my wife, you know what I mean? So there's a certain intensity that's in the happening in the world, but this matches my intensity, but not in the sense to embrace chaos, but seeing the possibility. And that's how I feel we need to approach these times. And there's nowhere to escape to. You can try to move anywhere, you know what I mean? Physically speaking, finding good, but ultimately the only safe place is within your own heart, go deeper within you. And once you approach that, you're safe anywhere. And that's how you find who you truly are, and then truly contribute, because we need to remember we chose to be doing this here during this time, right? And all what we're dealing with, our traumas, our wounds, our addictions, our shame, our guilt, these are sacred wounds we need to open and heal. And there's a purpose behind it in order to really, be the warriors we came here to do. And I also want to let every man know, if man listen to this, mostly like we all have, again, going back, you all have unique gifts, unique talents specific to you, which nobody else can do, right? So this is a task to uncover that, right? And your own creativity and contribute to the world that way.
Oh, such a good message. Thank you so much, Bernhard. It's been an amazing episode. You've just given so much wisdom and knowledge and shared your experience. I really want to thank you. And obviously, Laura there for doing the podcast. And thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Emma. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Please like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you in another few days with another episode of Heart Warriors. I like this one.